Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Yash. I hope you are having an amazing day because I'm having an amazing day. Today we're going to react to the video called Why is the US manipulating India and the world about Russia-Ukraine war? This is by Think School. Please go down and subscribe to the original creators. The link is down in the description. Also, please don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and my social media links are down in the description. Now let's get back to the video and we'll talk later.
Military operation is now underway in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine has declared a state of emergency.
The full-scale invasion that intelligence officials had been warning about for weeks is now underway, and there are reports of explosions and attacks at several major Ukrainian cities.
Hi everybody! Since the past 15 days, we've been bombarded with the news of the Russian invasion in Ukraine. And generally, in today's day and time, when global tensions between multiple countries are diffused through diplomacy and treaties, war is by far the most unexpected outcome of all. But in today's social media world, warfare has taken a new dimension in the form of propaganda. And this propaganda is coming from both sides, that's the Russian side and the Western side. And more specifically in India, this Western propaganda has been so strong that has literally been instigating the Indian citizens against our own government. Which is why in this episode today, we are going to decode what exactly prompted Russia to invade Ukraine, which I'm sure most of you already know. Secondly, we are going to throw light on how is the West hypocritically and very cleverly putting its concerns out. How is this affecting India, and most importantly, in the Indian context, as citizens of India, what exactly are we supposed to do in order to fulfill our duties the right way? This video is brought to you by Cuckoo FM, but more on this at the end of the video. First, let's go back in time to 1955. This is when the Cold War was going on. Soon after World War II, the USSR was head-to-head with the UK and the US. And back then, USSR was almost the most powerful nation in the world. But very recently, the world saw the case of Hitler, wherein one powerful leader with a powerful army went on a rampage to conquer all smaller countries nearby and almost got hold of the entire European region. So fearing the same could happen with the USSR, in order to counter their power, a military alliance was formed in 1949 by 12 countries, including the US, Canada, the UK and France. And this alliance came to be known as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. And the primary principle of making this alliance was that if any one of these nations in NATO got attacked, it would be considered as a personal attack on all nations. So, all the nations are supposed to deploy their army if any one of them in NATO was in trouble. So in response to NATO, in 1955, Soviet Russia created its own military alliance of Eastern European communist countries, and this alliance was called the Warsaw Pact. But this is what happened in 1991.
The Soviet Union itself is no more. This is a victory for democracy and freedom. I'd like to express on behalf of the American people my gratitude to Mikhail.
But fortunately or unfortunately, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and the Warsaw Pact countries started switching sides to become NATO members. Today, this NATO alliance has 30 members. And if you look closely, you will observe that today NATO has almost reached the Russian borders through Estonia and Latvia. And of late, Ukraine started expressing its intent to join NATO. Which means what? If Ukraine joined NATO, the threat of 31 countries including the US and UK will stand at the border lines of Russia. And this is where Putin's objection came in. Now just to give you a better context of why Putin is angry, let me ask you a question. Tomorrow if I tell you that the Chinese have joined hands with Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka, and they are not going to attack India, all they are going to do is place ballistic missiles at the border of Nepal, Pakistan and Bhutan and some warships in Sri Lanka. All of this is just being done for the sake of its safety. My question to you is, as an Indian, would you feel threatened or not? If yes, you understand exactly why Putin is placing demands to push back NATO. Now, this in no way justifies the invasion of Ukraine and the immense pain that is being caused to the innocent humans and animals in Ukraine. This is just to inform you as to why does Putin feel threatened and what is the reasoning behind his demands. And this is something that the Western propaganda channels will never ever tell you. So coming back to the story, when Ukraine showed the intent of joining NATO, Putin came out open and bold and said that the expansion of NATO must stop immediately. Secondly, NATO must reverse and go back to what it used to be in 1997. And lastly, he also said that Ukraine should never be allowed to join NATO. And as we all know, NATO refused to agree, Putin got angry, and finally, after multiple threats, on 24th of February 2022, the invasion of Ukraine happened. And this brings me to phase 2, and that is economic sanctions. Now that Russia has invaded Ukraine, the world has two options in which they can react. Number one, they could take the war head on and respond with their military. That would lead to firing, bloodshed, and maybe No. This would cost every country very, very heavily because Russia has nuclear weapons and most importantly, Ukraine is not yet a part of NATO. So practically, these nations cannot interfere with their army, which is why they went with the second option, and that is financial warfare. This is the reason why we saw something called economic sanctions come in. In simple words, economic sanctions are often designed to hurt a country's economy and to create an indirect pressure on the government to stop the war. In this case, the EU, US, UK, Japan and Canada have cut off all the key Russian banks from the international payment network called SWIFT. This payment network allows smooth and rapid transfer of money across borders. And this is expected to delay the Russian import and export payments, and it is even expected to slow down the borrowing, which might cause a potential loss of millions of dollars to the Russian companies. Secondly, the EU, UK and Canada has shut off their airspace to the Russian airlines. Personal sanctions are being imposed on Putin, and lastly, Germany has now halted the approval of Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. For those who don't know, Nord Stream 2 is a joint venture between Germany and Russia. It is a 1,200 kilometer pipeline that costed $11 billion and was completed in last September. And the Russian state-owned energy company called Gazprom actually put up half of the cost of this project. Now, although this pipeline does not have an operating license yet, in order to oppose Russia, Germany has now put this on hold. I'll attach a few links in the description to help you understand this deeper. For now, all you need to know is that this is what these countries are doing to wage a financial war against Russia. Now the question over here is, Putin has been in power since decades, right? So he obviously knew that these countries would impose sanctions on Russia. So the question is, what is Russia's strategy to oppose the West? Well, the answer to that question lies in this line that I read in Bloomberg, which said that you don't just shut down the second largest commodity producer in the world and not expect bad things to happen. What this means is that these sanctions are not just a threat to Russia, but will also have severe repercussions on the global economy itself. Why? Because Russia is the third largest producer of oil worldwide, accounting to over 12% of the global crude oil production. In fact, in 2021, the European Union alone imported 155 billion cubic meters of natural gas from Russia, which is around 45% of EU's gas imports and close to 40% of its total gas consumption. So guess what? What followed next was an energy mayhem that the world will remember for decades. Brent crude futures soared to a 10-year high near $120 a barrel. European natural gas is about $218 per megawatt hour, and coal futures are surpassing $400 a metric ton in Australia. Apart from that, Russia and Ukraine are also large exporters of wheat and corn, as well as essential metals like palladium, aluminium, and nickel. And these metals are used in everything from mobile phones to automobiles. As a result, wheat has jumped to its highest level since 2008, above 400 euros a ton in Paris. Aluminium hit a record above $3,800 a ton on the London Metal Exchange, and copper has already closed in on an all-time high. This is the cost of imposing sanctions on a global superpower like Russia. And now, there are two schools of thought. The first says that the Russian fortress will cripple due to the sanctions and will eventually withdraw, while the second school of thought say that the world itself cannot afford to keep the war going, because if crude oil touches the expected cost of $185 per barrel, it's going to result into inflation all across the world. And just like the 70s, this will be nothing short of an economic disaster. And this brings me to the most important part of the episode, and that is, where does India stand amidst all this drama, and what do we need to do about the Western propaganda? First of all, you need to understand the harsh reality of the world that we live in. That is, in geopolitics, world leaders care more about the rivals rising to power than actual human beings. And the entities that might appear to be ambassadors of peace may sometimes do things that are not exactly peaceful. For example, President Biden and Obama put out heartfelt messages about how much they feel for Ukrainians and how they condemn the acts of warfare by Russia. And you see every single media house screaming it out to the world, talking about the bombings done by Russia. But did you guys know that in 2016 alone, the United States dropped 26,177 bombs in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and Pakistan? That's 72 bombs every single day for 365 days a year, and 3 bombs every hour for 24 hours a day. And obviously, not all these bombs ended up killing a terrorist. My question to you is, how many of these media houses covered this and turned this into a sensation? How many of these bombs actually made into Twitter headlines and turned into Twitter trends? My question is, why didn't the West outrage over that? Well, that is because during that time, even though people were dying, children were dying, women were dying, they weren't threatened by any rival nation. But this time, Russia is rising to power and suddenly they have become ambassadors of peace. Now listen to me very, very carefully. Does this mean that you shouldn't talk about Ukrainians and the refugee crisis? Absolutely you must. In fact, you must donate, raise funds and do everything to help because innocent men, women, children and innocent animals are dying for no fault of theirs. But at the same time, my dear friends, always remember that the world leaders that you see are not standing up because they care about humans or animals. They do that because they care about power. And secondly, as citizens of a giant country like India, you need to understand that love between individuals and love in statecraft are two different things. So as humans, as Indians, you must feel for Ukrainians, you must donate, raise funds and do anything necessary to help them out because after all, humans and animals are suffering. But when it comes to a state like India supporting a state called Ukraine, it's a whole new dimension altogether. If you saw the UN walkout, while all other countries walked out on Russia, India did not. Why? Because India and Russia have fostered a very strong relationship for 50 long years. In the past 20 years, Russia accounted for 66.5% of India's arms imports. In 2021 alone, India exported $3.3 billion worth of goods to Russia. And most importantly, in 1971 Indo-Pakistan War, the British ships were about to target the western coast from the Arabian Sea, and the US was looking to move into the Bay of Bengal in the east. This is when Russia sent its army and came to our rescue to push both the Brits and the US back to their houses. This is the reason why India cannot oppose Russia, and that too during a time when the notorious Chinese troops are right at our borders. So although as citizens you could help the Ukrainians out, as a state, if India does that, we will lose out on a 50-year-old friend, making us extremely vulnerable to probably a Chinese invasion. And at the same time, we cannot oppose the West because over the due course of years, we have developed good ties with the UK and the United States. So basically, India is and must stay out of this war as much as possible. And what we need to do is stop cursing the government and blaming our own country under the influence of the propaganda. So please note that as a state, this is not our war and we must not fight it. As once a great man said, war is a strange game. The only way to win it is to not play it at all. And this brings me to the last part of the episode, and that are the geopolitical lessons that we need to learn as Indian citizens from the Russia-Ukraine saga. Before we move on, I want to thank our partners Kuku FM for supporting our content. People, now that you know the reality of the Russia-Ukraine war, I suggest you to listen and learn about world wars on Kuku FM. Kuku FM is India's leading audiobook platform with over 1000 hours of content library. They have a stellar 4.5-star rating and a huge library of non-fiction content. So if this is something that intrigues you, this is the best time to start. Why? Because Kuku FM is celebrating Holi through their ongoing campaign called Knowledge Ke Rang Kuku FM Ke Sang. And for this campaign, they are offering their yearly subscription at a 50% discount till 20th of March if you use the link in the description. The code for which is HOLY50. My favorite book summaries on their platform are The Art of War, The History of World War I, and the Second World War. And through these audiobooks, Kuku FM wants to transform lives with its easy medium of audio learning. So if you're someone who doesn't have time to read, you should definitely download the Kuku FM app from the link given below. Moving on, the first thing that we need to understand as citizens of India is that every time you hear the West talk about peace, always try to dig deeper and find out what exactly is their real concern. Is it power or genuinely people? Lesson number 2. Love and peace between individuals is not the same as love and peace between states. So always choose to differentiate both of them very carefully before putting out a social media outrage. And lastly, as citizens of India and the world, always remember, war is a strange game. The only way to win it is to not play it at all. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.
Okay, this was a long and interesting video. Like, it was like all different kind of perspectives about the war, and it went into the Cold War and a lot of history. It was a nice history lesson which I learned today. So let me start with my review of the video. So like in the start they spoke about the Russian or Soviet, whatever you want to use it, like the Russian perspective of what you call the entire war, which is like why the point of view, why did Putin have to attack Ukraine at this point of time itself. So like I kind of agree with the fact, cause like the Warsaw Pact, like because it's kind of a power battle between Russia and the United States, specifically of who will have more control in the Eurocentric world. So I kind of agree with the fact, like obviously like how he like gave the example of if China puts ballistic missiles across India everywhere, then obviously India will attack that country, like we will not take it. And like the same concept about Ukraine, but like to some extent I agree, like why Ukraine is kind of fearful of Russia because of its aggression and all. So it's a two-way street. I agree with the fact like you should not mix, you know, the loss of life and the devastation which is happening to the geopolitical interests of specific countries. Like how he gave the example of like these bombings took place, like a lot of them, like he gave a number of 26,000. That was a huge amount. Like I didn't know that many bombings took place across the Middle East, because like as he said, like Russia is the second largest producer or third largest producer of oil in the world. So they needed an alternative. So the only way to do that is to keep Middle East a little bit unstable and have arbitrary control over their oil and what you call security. So in a way that then it's kind of a monopoly, like a monopoly. So like they're trying to put also India in that kind of a position so that we don't buy oil from them and we buy from Saudi Arabia or you know some other country. And they've already put sanctions on Venezuela and Iran, so we have no other option. But like I support India's position in this, like we are being neutral, because we have nothing to gain from this, we have everything to lose from this. If we choose Russian side, then that would be disastrous for us, because like then the West will put sanctions on us. And if we choose the American side, we will lose a key strategic ally, and we cannot afford a China-Russian alliance. It would be a doomsday scenario for India. So that would never happen. Like that's like a worst case scenario. But obviously, like you know, like because like whenever there's war or you know a power struggle between two strong powers, so obviously there is loss of life, because that's the downside of geopolitics in any event which takes place around the world. So that's the bad part. But like yeah, obviously as a world, whatever we all can do, you know, to save the lives of these innocent people, women and children, we should do. There's no denial about it. Like I don't know, like during the starting of the war, a few Indians also died uh, in the conflict, which was obviously sad, unfortunate. It should not have happened. But like, yeah, I agree with most of it. And yeah, this is the one hypocrisy I don't understand of the West. Like, you know, when Afghanistan happened or when China put aggression on us, they never came to save us. We don't expect them also. But like, they didn't even make a statement like that strong how agitated they are about UK. So clearly understandable. It's not about democracy or human rights or anything like that. It's about their strategic interests, because the West strategic interests was in some way to keep the Middle East unstable. That is why these bombings took place. But on the other hand, they would not want the same thing to happen in Europe because they have their own interests. So we have to, as Indians, we should protect our own interests. We should not go blindsidedly because America is saying this, because the UK is saying this, we should follow the same. No. America is a different country, India is a different country. We have our own interests, they have their own interests. They have their own threats, we have our own threats. So we need to protect our own threats. And obviously, America's biggest strategic objective is to keep a unipolar world, but India's strategic objectives is an emergence of a multipolar world which is much more aligned towards Russia and China. But it does not mean we are allies of them. We have certain interests with America also, like in countering China in the Quad, in the Indo-Pacific. So there is a balance. We need more power. So like obviously, if the West thinks that, you know, like we've finished Russia off this map and then we will rule this world, it will not happen. Like even like as the situation will go from bad to worse, as he said, like if this continues, then the economical situation around the world would be like in the 1970s, which is like a doomsday scenario no one would want. I hope here also in Canada, like prices are increasing like crazy, so like no one would want the same, you know. So yeah, this is my review. I think we'll end the video right here. I hope you'll stay safe. Bye. Please like, subscribe and share. Thank you.